Welcome to the Build and Revitalize Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Roberts, Senior Manager of Innovation and Digital Strategy for SME. So it's 2025, and we're swimming in data on projects like never before. Soil profile information, subsurface results, existing and proposed grades, civil layouts, foundation designs, drone imagery, infrared scans, laser scans, LiDAR scans, remote vibration monitoring, pavement conditions, roofs, facades, engineering inspection results. It can be overwhelming. Client expectations have also evolved, relying more on experts like SME to not just manage the high volume of data, but to transform it into actionable insights. They look to us to bridge the gap between raw information and informed decisions, leveraging cutting-edge tools and technologies, as well as processes to ensure that their projects are completed more efficiently and with greater precision than ever before. For this podcast series, I'm interviewing 3 SME team members to talk about how we are capturing and leveraging data to give clients and owners a better understanding of their projects and the solutions that will drive their visions forward. I'm joined today by my colleague and SME GIS Coordinator, Tylor Mahany. For SME, one big way of getting our arms and heads around all this data is by using a Geographic Information System, or GIS. We're talking to Tylor about the essential role of GIS in leveraging data to develop practical solutions. Tylor, let's first talk a little bit about your role at SME.
So as you said, I serve as the GIS coordinator here at SME, as well as the technical expert within our GIS technologies. So my job is kind of twofold, focusing on both our clients' experiences and making sure products and projects go out on time when they involve a spatial component to their data analysis, as well as internally both educating the team on what are the benefits and how we can utilize GIS to help manage and improve our project tasks better, but as well as helping design internal tool sets to make us more efficient as well. So my job is both the external side as well as that internal.
So I have to ask, what part of your role is the most fun?
I have to admit, doing the external stuff, helping clients on projects is probably where it's most fun because those are the more unique challenges. When we're working on internal tasks, you're learning constantly, but you're learning about the company and you're developing a process that's going to be over and over again. But when a client comes to us and they're like, we have this problem, we need to, looking at this spatially would help us. How could we do it? There's that time restriction because the client may need it, something to be at least ready to be proofed in like a week or so. But then you also have how are we going to take this and make this project work? Because we're now we're probably communicating with multiple groups. Like there's a lot of projects that I work on that I'll be in touch with our environmental team, our geotech team, our CMS team. So that's kind of where the best parts of these projects kind of come in, is when you're at that client facing side.
Cool. No, that's great, Tylor. So how do we define GIS? So, Geographic Information Systems, but what is that really? Like, what's that mean to us? Is it just a software or a tool or a process? Like, kind of how do you think about GIS?
When I'm talking about GIS, I am looking at it as a mindset. Looking at GIS stands for Geographic Information System. So let's break that down. You have geographic or geospatial, so that's location data. That's any data on the planet that could be tied to a location. I talk to classes a little bit, and normally when I go in and I talk to a class of young people learning about GIS for the first time, I'm like, how much of the world's data do you think we could tie to a location? And the common answers I get is 50%, 75%. And I'm like, well, to me, it's a little closer to like high 90s, 99%. Almost all the world's data can be tied to a specific thing because we live on the planet somewhere, Then you have information, which is just another way of saying data. We're capturing data. It's not just that location data, but it could be stuff like colors. If we're looking at a building, we may break down each side of that building and count the number of windows on it. If we're looking at parts of road. We may be interested in how many cracks are in that section of road, what's the volume of those cracks, to help us judge our repairs. If we're looking at environmental work, we're looking at where are concentrations, where do we have historical data, what was here before. So you have that piece. And then you have system, which is you have the database system, you have the software system, but then you also have that spatial analyst system. And, how can I take this question that our client has and turn it into relook at it in a more data-focused, location-focused context. For example, when we're working on some of our larger projects, there's always a little bit of a concern when you're dealing with 1,000-acre sites, 2,000-acre sites of testing density. To make sure if we're building out the building pad or we're looking at compaction for a trench, where that is, that's not something that, the client's generally concerned with. That's something that we at SME are concerned with, to make sure that we're holding up the integrity of the process and something doesn't get missed. And when we're doing this, so we have our test and we have our data. It's that compaction, and we know where it is because we'll give our guides a GPS unit in the field and they can note their location. So we have location, we have the test. Now our system is, we'll go through, and at SME we use Esri softwares as kind of like our GIS tool, but we go beyond that a little bit, where we'll look at, anything to help the project go forward, where we'll look at, pulling in some BIM stuff. We'll look at pulling in some Civil 3D just to kind of help make sure the process is most efficient. But we'll go and we'll train the field staff to collect data, so this is where that process comes in. This is where that methodology comes in the system. The field staff's collecting location data. We're analyzing that data back at the office side using Esri softwares, but then our client is just seeing a PDF in the end. There's this whole background of making sure that we're collecting field location smart, we're collecting data location smart, and going forward.
Yeah, you used an interesting term right off the bat when I asked how you sort of think about and or would describe GIS, and you used the phrase mindset, which is interesting. And I wondered if we could dive into that just a little bit more, because when I think about GIS and how I've seen it kind of play out at SME, the word that always comes to my mind is collaboration, because we're bringing in so much different types of data from different sources for different services and even external client data into one place. There's a whole lot of sort of prerequisites for that to happen, and collaboration is one of the key ones. We have to be, good communicators, asking the right questions, getting the right information, and collaborating in that way. And that's no simple task. I think we do it really well at SME, but so when you said mindset, I immediately thought about this whole idea of the culture of collaboration within the company. So I was just curious, what, diving into that term mindset a little more, like, what do you mean by that?
For me, when I'm talking about the GIS mindset, or let's not even say GIS, let's just talk about more broadly as like a location data focused mindset. I'm looking at this as, one, at SME, we're getting really good at collecting location information when we take samples. We use a bunch of different programs, GPS units. We're not limited to, if something works better for our environmental team compared to our CMS team, we make sure that we use a program that's better for the environmental side compared to our construction materials side. But they share that same mindset of, when we take a sample, we need to keep the location information for that sample.
Gotcha.
The collaboration part that you brought up, because I want to touch on that because that was really good, is integral for us to get into that mindset. Because it doesn't help if only one group is trying to collect location information. What you've been seeing over the past few years since we started really pushing on this is a transformation more and more, that even like in our SCN group, we're using GIS technologies to help keep track of locations for some structures. When you see us in, we have survey here. That group started 5-6 years ago now, but like that's directly tied into helping GIS get off the ground, because there's that location tie-in. You see our geotech team for years now have been using GPS units to collect borehole locations. So you see all these different groups are now kind of starting to come together in one going, we are going to collect location information, we are going to collect our data information, and we're going to have a process for it. So that's where that GIS mindset comes in.
Oh, that makes sense. What's been really interesting to see is as more of our groups come in and start using GIS in different applications for their projects, they start making connections and they start seeing how GIS is an extension of the collaboration that's already happening on the project. And so I think it's really exciting to see our team members see the value, and then they're convinced, and then they're excited to share it with our clients because they just can't wait for the client to see, hey, we've the historical paper reports and PDF, these static things that are all in different places. We've got them all curated in one place, and we can show these trends and we can show the insights and the interconnections between the data sets. I'm thinking of an environmental case where you have a particular type of contamination in the soil, and you may suspect it's because of these historical uses on the property. But if you've got the Sanborn fire insurance map right there that you can turn on, off, or change the opacity, and that contaminated point shows right on top of an old former chrome plating facility or something, then it's a clear aha, it's a clear insight. And so I think that we're able to see all those connections in the data, and our teams are getting excited about having that access and that consistency of information and sharing and centralization, and then our ability to share that in interesting ways with the client. I know we'll talk about deliverables um, later on, but I think that when I mention what's your the favorite part of your job, for me, one of my favorite things about interfacing and interacting with GIS at SME is seeing that excitement in the team and in the clients, the client delight and the internal team member delight through these systems. Because at the end of the day, we are all trying to make sense of data, and GIS really helps you do that. But then also, it's got the visual component that I just think makes it just a little more icing on the cake. Even more impactful when you have the access to the data, the consistency, the centralization, but then also the ability to make it look nice. There's certainly a delight factor there.
If I can, Paul, this, what you're describing a little bit, especially like that chrome plane facility example, kind of reminds me of some stuff that I've seen in my time here at SME, where I'll say for like the geotech group and borehole logs, when there's a really complex site, I've actually seen, people take their borehole, print them out, go to our conference room and actually lay them out like as if they were on the site trying to make these spatial connections, you know but now, that's one person doing it, trying to do it, but now when you add that into that GIS framework, it not only keeps it from one person in the conference room, but now we can put that out to the whole project team, and maybe not just our geotech project team, but if our environmental team's on the site and there's this geotech issue, the environmental team can log in and see that right then and there as well, which may change what their recommendations. Someone may call it out a sandy clay, or is it a clayey sand? Those are two different things, but they may be called out differently by two different groups. So that now we have a consistent look and go, all right, we need to figure this out. Is this a clayey sand or is this a sandy clay?
That immediately reminded me of a project where it was in Detroit, and we had identified a specific clay unit on the site that was very stiff, so stiff that it had significant cost savings on foundation design if we were able to bear on that. If we were above it or below it, it wasn't. We couldn't design the foundations in a way to save a lot of cost. I mean, millions of dollars. And so that came to my mind because that's a very real world situation where knowing where that stiff clay was and was not was absolutely critical to the project. So we wax philosophical a little bit, talking about a mindset. and the kind of collaboration and the culture of sharing information. I'm thinking, for SME, we really shine when we do multi-service projects. We have our experts who are really good at what they do, but when we come together, there's always just some magic in that. And I think GIS is really helping us do that better and work together better. I was curious if you could kind of walk us through a little bit, how you see that value play out when we are providing multiple services on a single project.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take this through a project example. We were working on a project site in Western Michigan that was around 500 acres, if my memory serves right. And we had the contract with the client for everything. We were doing the survey work, we were doing the environmental work, we were doing preliminary geotech work. So all these services that SME provided were coming in for this one site. Our survey team was the first boots on the ground on the site. It was simple. We were doing a topographical survey. Well, as our survey guys were walking through, they saw some drums, some debris piles, and everything. And so we have a central GIS portal already established because that was something that we were going to do from the get go of the project. Well, what we're looking at here now is our environmental team's on site. We have a giant Teams chat with this. We're able to take screenshots of, hey, here's this site here. On the site, we found XYZ here, we found XYZ here. Here are the coordinates for the environmental team. So when they go out and do their site walk for their phase one evaluation, they can now maybe spend a little bit more time dedicated to these areas and go, let's do a little bit deeper dive here. Are we seeing anything else that we need to be concerned with here? But then this also translates over to our geotech side of things, because while our survey team's out there, they're also staking the geotech borings as well. So now we have multiple services groups literally working together on one central project. And you're now seeing GIS being used as that communication tool beyond your traditional, here's Teams, here's this, because you can now go into the GIS and take a screenshot and share it. Internal communication, we're helping this go so it's faster for the client.
That site has a really interesting use case that I think has both internal value and external value to the client. And it's the CMS, our Construction Material Services Group, is doing compaction testing. And it's, like you mentioned, a very large site with a lot of proposed structures and infrastructure being placed. And so we have thousands of test locations, and we have good test results. We have bad test results that we need to have a conversation with the client or contractor about, and ones we don't. But having that data managed through a GIS, I know I've seen that you have set up that experience in that map with filters of all the key information that we need to filter data by to have those conversations, flag issues, and resolve things. And so I think that I've seen that, and then I wonder how would we do that without a system like this? And so I think that it's transformative in a way where some of our team members who have used these GIS tools and ways of interacting with the data, once they have experienced it, they don't want to go back to older traditional methods. And so I think that's a really interesting evolution. And I think we're going to continue to see more of our team adopt it and kind of never look back. So specifically on this project, the GIS process was kind of at every step in the data collection, evaluation, and visualization program for the project. So Tylor had built a form, an app to fill in information in the field, and it was designed in a way to efficiently and consistently capture data for the test results. So internal project work order numbers, test identification, locations, reported elevations from the contractor, anything that can be pre-populated as a pick list or something was all set up. So there was a really nice efficiency and consistency factor in just the way data was collected and entered, which is new. That's not a traditional way. Traditional is like paper copies, having a foundation plan or something, and then jotting column line intersections and things, and having data attached back in kind of a loosey-goosey way, if you will. Now we're getting much tighter control on where exactly we're collecting this information. We're using Bluetooth GPS receivers that connect to our iPhones in the field and report with a higher degree of accuracy where test locations are. So the next step to that was the project review, where project managers, instead of reviewing a bunch of either scanned PDF notes, they're now looking at a web map and they're zooming in and out, turning layers on and off, filtering and querying certain areas, certain timeframes of testing. There was more efficiency on the data collection side, more efficiency, and just a better experience evaluating data and identifying good, bad, and in between, and having conversations with the client, but then being able to seamlessly export their view of a map and put it in an email or put it in a communication with the client. There's no it's a very seamless process. The data is collected, it's reviewed, and it goes out, and it's all sort of delivered through a GIS framework.
It comes back down to client experience for me, and that's kind of where my role as the GIS coordinator comes in. This is on that internal training side of, we can nerd out, we can do a lot of cool things, but what is the most practical and most effective to help the client with their project? Like a really complex example is we can make a 3D model of everything underground. Well, for 99.999% of projects, we don't need that level of 3D modeling for subsurface conditions. So even though that's something we could do, it doesn't make sense for every project. And that's where this conversation, from my point of view, for my role, is going, all right, here, project team, here, client, here are the challenges you're facing on site. Let's go through and let's dig in and figure out what is our question that we're trying to ask, what information, what location information do we need, what regular information do we need, how can we make a process to keep our location information and our data together throughout this process to make it easier and make it more digestible.
So we've talked about ways that we've changed some of the ways we've collected information and how we're benefiting internally, and how our clients are kind of experiencing some of our GIS deliverables and getting value from that. I think there's a story, kind of an important story about how we're using GIS to just be better engineers and better consultants. And so I was hoping you could kind of share a little bit about what we're doing internally that's helping us do that.
Yeah. So the primary way we're working to help our team internally is through our One Data portal. So One Data is the name that we're kind of giving to our collective SME knowledge throughout our 60 years. So what this portal does, it's a series of maps, kind of like if you went to a county GIS site where they have multiple different data layers, they have multiple different maps possibly, kind of something similar, but just focused on SME. In the One Data system is a series of project maps, so historical projects that we've worked on, that allows our team to filter down everything from client sector to location and year to who was the project manager, who was the assistant project manager, all taken through and put onto a map, because over our 60 years, we've done over 95,000 projects. When you're looking at these historically, I think it kind of tells an interesting thing, because when I started SME 5 years ago, in training we talked about, well, we started our Ohio office in 2010, 2011, but in our using the mountains of project information, our first Ohio project was in 1965, and it was a bridge rebuild just outside of Cleveland. You no longer had to be start at SME in 1965 to know that we did this bridge project in Ohio. The other part of One Data that is really cool, in my opinion, is the boring archive and sample archive that we have growing out. And it continues to get bigger every day, where we're looking at old projects and we're looking at our current projects and plotting out where do we have samples and simple information. Not detailed, not what are our contaminants, but did we hit bedrock? Did we run an environmental analysis? Was there a soil analysis or groundwater analysis? When was it collected? Especially if it's a redevelopment site, there may have been fill added to the site. Stuff may have changed year over year over year. So knowing, how that site's changed, what was taken out, what was added, what was there before, can really help provide a better context to the subsurface conditions and making us an overall better engineer.
I look at it kind of so this one data is an internal resource we've created, and we're evolving and growing, and we're getting feedback from team members about what data they think would be useful. I've seen this system, and I think it's pretty incredible in terms of the ocean of data that's out there. We can cherry pick what is important to us, and instead of bookmarking these obscure web links to those data sets, and sometimes even remembering to go look at those data as part of an evaluation or something, we have it all automatically pulled into our system, and we can basically mine for the good ideas and then memorialize them by automatically pulling them in from here forward into our one data system. And now all the team members benefit. And that's great for us, but also for our clients. We're not starting at zero when they come to us with a new project. And especially when we have the clients that engage us early, because they know we've been in the area so long, we have so much institutional knowledge, we bring a lot to the table. We're not starting at zero. We're already halfway down the track, and have all this knowledge and experience that we can sort of hit the ground running as they're kind of planning and thinking about their development. So I think the one data system is powerful that way.
With that as well, I feel like it also, you mentioned that's starting from zero, and I think that's a really critical point that we need to underscore here, is that when it comes to one data, from the moment we get in a proposal on a site, we can now start looking at, hey, this site right next door, right down the street, when we were drilling there 5 years ago, we ran into heavy organic contents, which could cause issues if you do, depending on your foundation type, you may need to remove it. There may be issues with compaction of the soil underground. We now know, hey, client, I know you said you want 3 boardings, but based on the site size and what we know, we may need to go up to 5 boardings just to help prevent and save you money when you go to construction. The little bit of cost here can equal millions of dollars in savings because we now came in prepared knowing that there could be issues on site, that if we didn't have this and the team members didn't know about the project, I feel like that's the biggest benefit, is that it allows everyone to know about everyone else's work.
So I'm such a believer in these tools and this technology. I have a personal anecdote. Um, you can have all this data, but you have to, at the end of the day, know what to do with it, and what story you want to tell with it, and ultimately what's the value you're trying to derive from it. So my funny personal anecdote is, I created my own personal little GIS system to help with a hobby of mine, which is recreational gold prospecting. And I have a lot of hobbies, but this is my current one, and a way to kind of get more familiar with some of the public data sets, and also use some of these tools and help kind of evangelize some of this tech, and benefit within the company, was building out my own little prospecting database to help me understand where can I legally recreationally gold prospect, like what streams and rivers am I allowed to do that. Um, so that's like basically public data sets from the state that say here are parks that have mineral rights owned by the state, and then looking at actual downhole lithology, soil conditions, and soil types from private wells that have been installed, and the state requires drillers to submit logs. And so there's hundreds of thousands of downhole logs from the state. And so, of course, I'm looking at very specific types of soil that I think might be associated with gold, river gold. And I'm looking, so where are the parks where I can do it? Where are rivers that cut through those parks? And then where are soil conditions conducive to potentially finding gold? So I've got this really fancy database curated with all these maps. And it was very rewarding to have pinpointed a spot within about 2 hours drive from my house, where I spent a Saturday, drove out there with some minimal gear, and got to a spot on a river and was recreational panning, and within about an hour found some actual river gold. So I'm definitely a believer in the tools, and I've seen the benefits extend even beyond the professional into personal uses. So. Thank you for listening to the Build and Revitalize podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share this with your friends, team members, and industry partners.